The MQ-9 Reaper's camera unit rotated slowly under the silver glow of the moon. At 15,000 feet, its heat sensor locked onto a thin line of motion below. 4 boats, each running dark, radio silent, heading northwest. No flags, no ID beacons. The AI aboard the drone tagged them Narco Class Delta, a new classification developed after last month's escalation order. Within seconds, data coded securely with AES-256 protocols was routed to the U.S. Southern Command main command post at Roosevelt Roads Naval Base, Puerto Rico. The newly reopened Cold War fortress, now humming with over 10,000 troops and F-35Bs. On the carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, 500 miles east, the order to attack was given. The order, deadly attack. Treat vessels as hostile fighters. At 2:43 a.m., 4 Hellfire R-9X missiles were released. Each tore through the night with no blast charge, only spinning sharp metal cutters. The first boat split open mid-hull. Its heat trace vanished in seconds. By 2:50 a.m., the Caribbean was littered with burning debris and human silhouettes lost to the sea. 14 confirmed dead. No survivors. The U.S. military headquarters listed it as a win against drug smugglers. But internal command data told another story. Out of 17 destroyed vessels, only 5 contained trace narcotics. Chance of hitting innocents, 71%. By dawn, the United Nations issued an urgent official statement condemning killing at sea without clear targets. The phrase Caribbean killing spree began trending across coded Latin channels before dawn. Meanwhile, on the ground in Ceiba, Puerto Rico, construction crews expanded hangar space for MV-22 Ospreys and CH-53K King Stallions, heavy lifters preparing for something larger. The Roosevelt Roads Naval Station, once an abandoned old base shuttered in 2004, was now the command spine of a new kind of shadow war. At 9 a.m., intercepted Venezuelan communications indicated Su-30 Mk-2 fighter jets had been armed with Kh-31 anti-ship missiles. The tone was clear. Caracas had drawn its line. The U.S. called it Operation Deep Current. Venezuela called it an act of war. The Caribbean seas are now a live combat zone under the cover of drug interdiction. But as Venezuela arms up and Russia and China start whispering across secure satellites, a silent escalation begins. The old base smelled of jet fuel and rebirth. Once a shuttered old base, Roosevelt Roads Naval Station now pulsed with electronic signals and the hum of F-35 jets waiting with engines on fresh tarmac. Construction crews worked around the clock under armed supervision, repaving taxiways, hardening hangars, and wiring new safe connections to space that connected directly to U.S. Southern Command's computer-controlled war system, ArgusNet. By early October, the Caribbean sky had changed. The airspace around Puerto Rico was now Blue Zone Alpha, monitored by Sea-Watch planes and layered with radar coverage that could track a rowboat 300 miles out. The U.S. deployment, 8 warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, and 10,000 personnel represented 14% of the Navy's full fighting strength worldwide. For a drug war, it was a fleet too heavy, too advanced, and too quiet. At 7:30 a.m., an encrypted link opened to the Pentagon. ADM Alvin Halsey. All systems working again, but I have concerns about the law regarding recent orders. Cole Hegseth. Admiral, the Commander-in-Chief classified this a domestic fighting. Every boat, every pilot, every radar ping tied to drug gang support systems is now a combatant. Don't overthink it. Execute. Minutes later, Halsey filed a resignation notice. It never reached the media. By midday, 5 F-35Bs took off in combat pairs, flying racetrack patterns over the sea. Stealth, sensors hot, waiting for another target, choosing. Inside the command bunker, analysts traced Venezuelan military frequencies. 2 Su-30 Mk-2 fighters were flying out of Barcelona Air Base, flying very low over the water. Each carried missiles that hit radar signals, designed to lock onto radar emitters. The pattern was unmistakable. Venezuela was testing American reaction time. At 8:45 a.m., ArgusNet flagged a blip, a radar signature from a fishing vessel that matched drug route tracking codes with only 62% certainty. Within minutes, drones were flying. By 9 a.m., the vessel was gone. 6 more dead. No drugs. No names. A single number in a digital log. Target destroyed. For every kill, fewer certainties remained. Satellite intercepts from late October confirmed the next stage. Russian technicians arriving in Caracas, advising Venezuelan defense crews on radar hardening and making missiles precise. Moscow called it training assistance. Washington called it coincidental timing. But coincidence was running out. As Roosevelt Roads turns from base to battlefield, Venezuela's radar eyes awaken, guided by Russian code and Chinese hardware. The first fight using only radar jamming in the Caribbean is about to begin. At 7:30 p.m. local time, Roosevelt Roads Naval Station, Puerto Rico. The order was confirmed through a 3 layers of coded transmission. Operation Trident Sweep was now live. Inside the base's hardened command dome, the Joint Task Force Caribbean, JTFC, watched as 12 MQ-9 Reaper Block 5 drones took off into a crimson dusk. Each carried AGM-114R Hellfire missiles and GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, enough firepower to erase a small convoy in seconds. Weather across the region was volatile. Dense maritime clouds, 30-knot winds, and humidity that warped radar returns. The Reapers, flying at 25,000 feet, fixed themselves automatically using self-piloting AI flight stabilization algorithms, DARPA Blackfin system, that corrected for drift 400 times per second. From orbit, a P-8A Poseidon relayed coordinates of suspected Venezuelan drug vessels moving north from La Blanquilla. At 8:17 p.m., cross-domain AI fusion confirmed 9 targets across a 180-mile arc. Pattern-matching algorithms identified identical hull profiles and IR signatures, smugglers or scouts. Analysts approved strike parameters, no return fire expected, minimal civilian risk, but the line between war and policing was already blurring. At 8:52 p.m., the first Hellfire struck, impact visualized as a pulse of light on infrared monitors. 2 more boats disintegrated under 500 lbSDB detonations. $450,000 worth of weapons destroyed, assets worth less than $40,000 total. Efficiency, in military terms, was absolute, morally impossible to excuse. By 9:40 p.m., radio talk suddenly increased across Venezuelan coastal radio channels. Unknown coding, possibly Chinese-assisted. The mission clock was reset. Detection phase was over. The Caribbean was now an active war grid. While drones returned to Puerto Rico, shadow signals from Venezuela's defense grid hinted at preparing to aim back. Something unseen was preparing to look back. At 2:15 a.m. local time, north of Caracas, Venezuela, in pitch-black skies, 2 Su-30 Mk2 Flanker G fighter jets that stop other planes took off from El Libertador Air Base. Their radars were cold, running silent heat sensing only. On board, pilots relied on heat-seeking equipment, capable of detecting heat traces at 50 kilometers. Above them, US RQ-170 Sentinel hidden observer planes watched silently from 45,000 feet, relaying imagery through the fast response communication, a low-delay network tested in Syria. The Venezuelan command believed it had detected foreign radar ghosts. In truth, electronic attack tools aboard a USS Zumwalt-class destroyer, stationed 300 miles northeast, were creating fake targets on radar across their radar grid. The electronic jamming disrupted the flankers' targeting computers, creating fake images on the screen that danced across their HUDs. At 2:43 a.m., a drone released a decoy burst, Bright Cloud 218 active RF decoys, simulating missile signatures. The flankers panicked, deploying defense actions and breaking formation. For 3 minutes, Venezuela's entire air defense network, 10 radar sites, flooded the airwaves with uncoordinated bursts. The US drones mapped every electronic profile, building a complete radar blueprint of the nation's coastal radar. The cost ratio was staggering, $6,000 in decoy tech for a $12 million disruption of enemy tracking systems. Precision was evolving beyond firepower. It was control through computer code. But soon, the deception would end. The next strike would not rely on illusion. It would hit hard and visible. At 4:10 a.m. UTC, 500 nautical miles west of Colombia, 3 US MQ-9B Sky Guardian drones broke from high-altitude cruise, diving toward low-level attack altitude. Their mission? Target 4 suspect vessels, moving under no flag, likely Venezuelan armed non-soldiers supply boats. The drones used advanced viewing systems, identifying heat blooms through low-lying fog. At 4:27 a.m., order came from Task Force Delta 7 aboard USS Bataan LHD-5. The drones switched to strike mode. Simultaneously, Venezuela's Coastal Electronic Attack Unit lit up the sky with Russian Krasuka-4 jamming signals, forcing the Sky Guardians into self-piloting. AI subsystems rerouted through backup satellite connections, compressing signal delay to under 1.8 seconds, enough to retain deadly precision. By 4:39 a.m., Hellfires launched in coordinated sequence. Impact confirmed on all 4 vessels. Fireballs streaked across the water, brief suns in the dawn. The operation log marked 14 killed in action. Later analysis would reveal that at least 3 of the dead were unarmed civilians. The UN statement the next morning would call it breaking the rule of necessary force. The US claimed success, narco-terrorist targets removed. But within 48 hours, Russian surveillance aircraft were seen near Curaçao. The chessboard had widened. As the world debated legality, the Caribbean sky grew crowded, satellites repositioned, jets fueled. The next operation would redefine the boundaries of the hemisphere. At 11:02 a.m. local time, USS Gerald R. Ford, Caribbean Sea. The supercarrier cut through rising swells as a tropical depression brewed to the east. Lightning flashed across a horizon filled with digital eyes. E-2D Hawkeye air control and warning planes, MQ-25 Stingray refuelers, and F-35Cs, armed for stopping ships at sea. The airspace was thick with coded data streams. At 11:17 a.m., the carrier's Combat Direction Center detected multiple radar reflections north of Isla Margarita. The signal's signature didn't match smugglers or fishing fleets. It was too ordered, too synchronized. Analysts tagged it Pattern Sierra, possibly Venezuelan fast attack craft, running silent under electronic protection. The Ford launched a 4-ship F-35C strike package, escorted by 2 EA-18G Growlers tasked with jamming enemy sensors. The jets flew close to the cloud ceiling at 32,000 feet, made nearly invisible to radar. Within 10 minutes, their advanced radar drew detailed pictures. 11 fast boats, likely militia crewed, fanning outward like a claw. At 11:52 a.m., Command authorized engagement. Each F-35 released 2 GBU-53B Stormbreaker smart bombs. Cost $195,000 each. Within seconds, 6 vessels vanished in thunderous plumes, hulls shredded by the 250 lb precision weapons. But as the strike team turned back, Venezuelan Buck M2E launchers on the mainland lit up, locking radar tracks on the retreating jets. The Growlers responded with strong, wide-range electronic attack, flooding the radar bands with fake flight data. The missiles launched blindly, 7 streaks through storm clouds, detonating harmlessly over open water. The message was unmistakable. Venezuela had entered the fight. In Washington, new authorizations were being drafted. The next operation would not stop at the waterline. At 3:40 a.m. GMT, U.S. military. Computer Warfare Unit, Fort Meade, Maryland. Monitors glowed cold blue as cyber operators watched information from space. A string of commercial satellites, seemingly weather relays, had begun transmitting coded bursts at irregular intervals over the Caribbean. Their signatures matched neither NOAA nor European meteorological patterns. The algorithmic heartbeat resembled Chinese Beidou timing signals. Cross-comparison confirmed it. Unknown data packets were piggybacking on civilian bands to feed targeting coordinates in near real time. The packets were located from 3 points: source node, Shenzhen, routing through Venezuelan ground terminals at Palo Negro. At 4:15 a.m., the U.S. launched Operation Ghost Veil, a joint computer attack leading to physical action. Using hacking entry points, they injected wrong data into the Beidou feed, throwing out-of-time satellite guidance by 0.9 seconds, enough to cause any dependent missile or radar lock to miss by miles. But the electronic attack came at a price. Within minutes, the cyber warfare room registered attempts to hack back from unknown computer addresses, most traced back to Hainan. A silent war in orbit had begun, invisible yet consequential. The U.S. had spent $8.7 million in cyber infrastructure damage prevention that night alone. Less than a single Tomahawk launch, but with hugely increasing worldwide danger. In the Caribbean below, the fog of electronic warfare gave way to heat. The next strike would not come from the air. It would emerge from beneath the surface. At 6:10 a.m. local time, 220 nautical miles north of Caracas, beneath 400 meters of rolling Atlantic swell, the USS North Dakota SSN 784 drifted silent in stealth mode. Her mission? Stop a Venezuelan supply convoy escorted by foreign observers, possibly Russian technicians. Passive sonar tracked metallic murmurs, diesel signatures consistent with Project 636 Varshavianka submarines, export variant known to be stealthy but not invisible. At 6:42 a.m., North Dakota's combat AI, Cerberus, initiated copying sounds, transmitting low-frequency pulses that blended with normal ocean sounds. The illusion was perfect. Hostile sonar operators heard nothing but ocean life. By 7:03 a.m., the target convoy entered firing range, 18 kilometers, 2 Mk-48 Mod 7 torpedoes launched, traveling at 55 knots. One struck a fuel tender, detonating its reserves in a column of fire visible from 20 miles. The second missed, its seeker spoofed by Venezuelan decoys imported from Iran. The explosion triggered panic. Escort vessels scattered, radar and sonar transmitting openly, revealing their full tactical layout. North Dakota logged every emission for analysis before slipping into thermal layers and vanishing. The U.S. command claimed defensive engagement. Caracas declared it an act of war. In diplomatic cables, both sides wrote different versions of the same lie. Venezuela's return attack was unavoidable. What began as drug fighting would now escalate into state conflict. The next moves would test red lines drawn decades ago. At 2:40 p.m. local time, Western Caribbean Air Defense Corridor. By mid-November, the tension had grown into open skies. U.S. air control and warning planes orbiting 200 miles north of Aruba detected incoming radar tracks, 4 Su-30 Mk-2s from the Venezuelan 11th Fighter Group. They flew low, fast, and deliberate, flying close to the sea's curve at Mach 1.2. Each carried KH-31A anti-ship missiles, range 70 miles. Their heading pointed straight toward the USS Thomas Hudner, DDG-116, a $1.8 billion Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. At 2:52 p.m., the Su-30s broke formation, launching 2 KH-31s together. The missiles skimmed the waves, guided by radar signals at Mach 2.5. The Hudner's main defensive computer system instantly engaged. Defense missiles streaked out at 3,500 mph. One hit clean, destroying the first KH-31 in the sky. The second exploded just short of the hull, shredding deck plating and injuring 6 sailors. The destroyer listed slightly but stayed working. Minutes later, U.S. command ordered return attack. 2 F-35Cs from the Ford Carrier Strike Group entered the zone, tracking the retreating Su-30s. At 3:05 p.m., they fired AIM-120D AMRAAMs from 50 miles. Both hits confirmed. The flankers broke apart before their pilots could eject. The skies fell silent, but world politics reacted strongly. The UN Security Council met within 12 hours. Venezuelan state TV showed the smoking wreckage, declaring imperialist murder. Washington framed it as defensive keeping in check. The cost sheet told another story. $7.6 million in weapons spent to destroy aircraft worth half that. But cost was now unimportant. Momentum had taken command. In the silence after the gunfire, another war front was opening, one that no satellite could see. At 3:30 a.m. GMT, Fort Meade, Caracas, Shanghai, 3-network relay. The digital battlefield unfolded without a shot fired. Venezuelan cyber operators, using Iranian-built Tondar malware, launched coordinated attacks targeting the U.S. Southern Command's logistics servers. For 6 minutes, power fluctuated across Roosevelt roads. Fuel inventories scrambled into nonsense. It wasn't destruction, it was distortion. But U.S. Cyber Command's AI Sentinel, Archon 5, fought back instantly. It detected the malware's command and control node buried inside a neutral ISP in Singapore. In under 90 seconds, Archon infiltrated, copied, and reversed the code's origin, feeding corrupted data back through proxies until Venezuelan systems exploded. Dozens of radar and targeting consoles went offline simultaneously, paralyzing the Air Force's ability to coordinate. The attack cost Washington $4.2 million in bandwidth and hardware burnouts. Caracas suffered over $50 million in infrastructure damage. But beyond numbers lay the truth. The first confirmed live computer code versus computer code battle in the Western Hemisphere. By dawn, both sides had restored partial working ability, but the mutual distrust was irreversible. The Caribbean had become a testbed for fighting, guided by computer codes. Deception in code had bought only hours. Steel and fire would resume. Venezuela's return attack was already in motion, and the next engagement would be the largest yet. At 7:10 a.m. local time, Gulf of Paria, Trinidad-Venezuela border. Radar operators aboard the USS Bataan, LHD-5, picked up dozens of small blips moving in formation. They weren't aircraft or fishing boats. They were Type 022 Hubei-class missile boats, clearly Chinese-designed, but flying Venezuelan flags. Intelligence later confirmed that 4 had been delivered under a maritime training exchange in October. The small fleet advanced at 36 knots. U.S. Reaper drones tracked from 20,000 feet, while P-8A Poseidon aircraft prepared for visual confirmation. The boats carried C-802 anti-ship missiles, range 120 kilometers. The math was grim. Within 12 minutes, they'd be in deadly range of the Bataan. At 7:26 a.m., Task Force Delta 7 initiated defense actions. F-35Bs launched from Roosevelt Roads, their AN APG-81 radars scanning in low chance of being seen mode. The strike commenced at 7:32 a.m. 8 LRASM, long-range anti-ship missiles, deployed, gliding 200 miles before hitting targets in unison. The result was cinematic destruction. 6 confirmed kills, 2 disabled, debris smoking across turquoise waters. But 1 missile boat escaped, limping toward Venezuelan waters. The Pentagon's after-action report noted $160 million in weapons used for vessels worth a fraction of that, yet preventing huge fleet losses. On social media, images spread like wildfire, charred Venezuelan flags burning in the surf. Maduro called it mass murder. The UN called it one-sided increase in fighting. The world was watching now. Both sides had been hurt, and neither could retreat without losing standing. The final acts would decide not just control, but the story told. At 10:30 p.m. local time, northern Venezuela. The target was not a drug boat or radar dome. It was a military relay station inside Bolívar province, believed to host command connections tied to Chinese satellite coordination. From the Roosevelt Roads base, 3 F-35Bs took off under complete electronic silence, each carrying 2 GBU-39B small-diameter bombs and 1 JSOW-ER glide weapon, a stealth package made for deep gray denial operations. At 11:22 p.m., the jets reached the coastline, descending to 250 feet above the water. AAQ-37 sensors mapped heat traces on the Venezuelan jungle canopy. The pilots switched to computer-assisted target finding, letting onboard neural filters isolate synthetic signals from false radar ghosts. What they found startled command. 2 of the heat sources matched Russian mobile radar trucks, possibly run by contractors. At 11:37 p.m., the first glide bomb released, impacting within 1 meter of coordinates. Secondary blasts confirmed the presence of stored fuel or ammunition. The other targets vanished in cascading fireballs. From above, the landscape flashed like a flickering wound. Then came the surprise. Venezuelan S-125 Pechora 2M batteries fired blindly into the darkness, guided by nothing but guesses. 1 missile tracked too well. The lead F-35's right stabilizer took a glancing hit, damaging its radar-absorbing coating. The aircraft struggled out, escorted by its wingman, vanishing into storm clouds before radar lock could re-engage. $2.1 million in weapons had erased an installation worth less than $100,000, but the real target had been psychological. Caracas would wake to flames without knowing who lit them. The smoke over Bolívar drew worldwide strong disapproval. As UN inspectors prepared statements, Russia's defense plan was already flying. At 5:40 a.m. Moscow time, Central Command Bunker, Odintsovo. Within hours of the Bolívar strike, coded talk rippled through Moscow's southern military district. Russian analysts compared radar activity and confirmed American operational signs. The Kremlin ordered limited targeted support. By 6:15 a.m., an Il-76 transport left Engels Air Base, carrying Krasuka-4 electronic warfare systems, R-330ZH jammer trucks, and a dozen advisors. Destination: Barcelona, Venezuela. At the same time, 2 Tu-142 MZ Sea-Watch planes began flying high-altitude scouting missions along the Caribbean edge, shadowing the USS Gerald R. Ford from 80 miles out. The data was relayed to Venezuelan command via coded fiber. Within 2 days, Venezuela's reduced radar network hummed again, now powered by Russian computer codes and Chinese timing synchronization. Electronic silence gave way to finding positions by triangulating. The Americans knew it. Roosevelt Roads increased DEFCON to level 3 for the first time since 2001. At 9:30 a.m. local, US Reaper feeds began showing unusual interference, short, sharp electromagnetic pulses flooding their uplinks. The Krasuka units were live, frying bandwidth across entire sectors. 1 drone lost signal, flew off course, and crashed near the Colombian border. The game had changed. It was no longer US versus Venezuela. It was US versus an invisible 3 groups of experts and radios, stretching from Moscow to Beijing. As the skies burned with static, the final decision loomed in Washington: a strike to end it, or a retreat wrapped in diplomacy. At 7:15 p.m. ST, White House Situation Room. The air smelled of stress and recycled coffee. Analysts, generals, and legal counsel filled the room. The president sat silent as real-time feeds from the Caribbean flickered on the wall. Storm clouds, radar sweeps, heat traces of human lives measured in pixels. The options were laid out. Launch Operation Leviathan, a 72-hour attack that hits everything at once, targeting Venezuelan radar, naval, and communication assets. Estimated casualties 800 plus, Stop fighting and negotiate through Brazil as a go-between. Risk: perceived retreat, regional loss of ability to stop an attack through fear of return. At 7:37 p.m., NORAD confirmed 3 unknown missile firings from Venezuela's southern coast, possibly C-802 missiles, aimed far out to sea. The room froze. 42 seconds later, radar confirmed they'd splashed harmlessly short, fuel spent. A fake threat or a warning. The president exhaled. The order given was not Leviathan. It was Echo Freeze, immediate stop, electronic silence, and withdrawal of strike authorizations. The Caribbean grew quiet again, its silence loaded with unsent missiles and unburied truths. By dawn, U.S. drones hovered only for surveillance. Roosevelt Roads dimmed its runway lights. The Ford Carrier Strike Group turned north. Official reports framed it as mission complete. Off record, one general called it the closest we've come to open war in the Western Hemisphere since '62. Operation Trident Sweep began as a drug-fighting campaign, but evolved into a regional crisis involving 3 global powers. The U.S. destroyed 17 vessels and multiple Venezuelan military sites. Venezuela, aided by Russian and Chinese systems, proved capable of tactical resistance and regional disruption. While open war was narrowly avoided, the episode changed Caribbean security rules. Self-piloted strikes now blur the boundary between law enforcement and warfare. Analysts estimate a $1.2 billion operational cost for an engagement that yielded no major advantage but changed global rules for computer-driven conflict orders.